I believe I did a fairly good job of staying calm and collected in my earlier response. I can't promise I'll do so here.
Characters. There is so much I want to talk about here, but there's only so much I can fit into a video.
You could make this as long as you need it to be. Why limit yourself to only 13 minutes if you want to do more?
Really think about what type of game your character is for. Is this character for a massive character-driven plot-heavy super game? Or is it something more MMO-esque, where the player character is just there to be the player character?
One line in, and I'm already in physical pain. Oh my god. First off, in your world building video you said you start with the characters, and here you're saying you need to think about what kind of game the character is for. See, the characters are the chicken and the world is the egg, I guess.
Fatal error!
Secondly, no, the game doesn't matter. Why are you conflating characters and story with gameplay? The only case this makes any sense is with your second example here, where the protagonist is just a surrogate for the player. But this isn't writing the character differently to fit the game, it's just a lack of character. And finally, this isn't really changing the way you write characters in the game. It's much simpler to just say, think about whether you want a silent protagonist or not.
Characters are an incredibly important part of most games.
No shit.
Even if your story is absolutely terrible, just having lovable and unique characters could potentially save it.
What? No! They're one and the same! If you think the story is bad and the characters are good, well, you found the problem. The story should come from the characters, not be an arbitrary thing they're forced to follow.
Now for me, personally, characters are the basis for all of my game.
Oh, but now you go back to that. But just a moment ago you said you have to think of the game before writing the characters. Just make up your mind already. And I personally think you shouldn't ever try to write something without any meaning behind it. It should be something you want to do, built from something, whether that be a character or world idea or anything really. If you start from no idea or driving force, you're forcing yourself to write it. It's just bland and lifeless. Gaia's melody certainly helps prove my point.
I think of the characters I want to show off, and how they'd interact with each other. Then think of what kind of world they'd exist in, and go from there.
So you do realize that letting the story come naturally from the characters is the only way it'll feel, well, natural. Yet you still make this arbitrary separation between characters and plot. Do you realize everything you say contradicts itself?
Having a small focused group lets you spend more time developing them. I find characters here tend to form stronger bonds with each other.
Yeah, limiting your cast is good. Handling even 4 characters at once can be difficult to really characterize them. Of course, you say this while having like 8 or 9 party members.
On the other hand, making a large cast gives the player variety, both in terms of personality and mechanics. It also gives the player the ability to pick and play with their favorite characters.
Variety of forgettable stereotypes? Or a small cast of characters that are more interesting in story and gameplay, as for each one has multiple times more opportunities to be interesting and time to develop? I think I'll go with the latter. Really though, it's impossible to handle that many main characters. Even in Gaia's Melody, your own game, only 2 people are ever involved in a cutscene. Everyone else just stands around like idiots, and you still stand by having a large cast?
The point is to have the player assume the role of the main character or characters. To experience—
Shut it. I know what a protagonist is. You don't need to explain it to me.
Character A here is the hero. He's got to go save the world from the evil king. He's doing this because he's the good guy. Character B is also the hero, but he doesn't like being called that. He once looked up to the evil king, but now realizes that he no longer can.
You are literally saying, give motivation to your characters. 1, you don't do that yourself. 2, this is the most obvious common sense advice, if I can even call it that, I have ever heard. Do you really think you're the first person to ever write anything? This is all so damn obvious, and yet you present it as if you're even deserving of being called a writer.
There's a scene in Gaia's Melody, another epilogue, one of the games I made, My original intention for the scene was to have a nice little cutaway conversation between two of the characters, before carrying on with the section. Then, somehow, main character Akira hijacked the entire conversation, went into I'm a little crazy and I have problems psycho mode, and pretty much shut down the entire continuation of the scene.
Good, that's exactly what you want. You want your characters to be dynamic and alive enough to do their own thing. I'm actually really looking forward to the sequel now if it's like that.
Now, having that happen in the actual game would have broken the entire next part, so I rewrote it closer to my original intention.
God damn it. Literally, every time I say something positive to you, you ruin it. You've just admitted here that your characters are flat and are forced to do things that they would not do because letting them be natural would overcomplicate things. You are the laziest writer I've ever seen.
But believe what you want, characters have a will of their own. The more real your characters become, the less control you have over what they actually do.
Yeah, that's the intention. Then you happen.
How do we make our characters real?
It's a vague term about a very complicated subject, but I can tell you two things that will definitely help you get there. First thing, I know this will sound a bit obvious, but being invested in your own work is key. Having a kind of focus, respect for your work is one of the most important things in making it feel real. And the second thing, which is debatably more important, is much simpler and easier step, but I don't know if you're ready for this. It's too mind-blowing. Are you sure you're ready? Okay, here it is. Don't literally go out of your way to rewrite a scene to force your characters to follow a pre-scripted plot. Okay.
Simple things like how you have the character move and react to situations can add to their characterization. Each character, like each person, needs their own way of speaking, which needs to appear in as much of their dialogue as possible. For example, Kachi here is spontaneous and kind of a comedic weirdo. She says what she wants and she doesn't really care if you get it or not. She likes calling people by nicknames and likes teasing people, especially Akira. But she can also be serious when it's something important to her.
Notice that none of the things you list about Kachi have anything to do with the more subtle aspects of characterization, like body language or speech patterns that you mentioned. Just feel like I should point that out, that you practically go out of your way to not listen to yourself. I'm gonna skip most of the rest of this section as she mainly just repeats herself, but listen to this one part.
The plot changes her.
Yes, the plot changes her. It's not like people could actually reflect on events or their own actions themselves. No, we need arbitrary tragic events to spoon-feed character development.
Let's say our game kills off a character. How do we get the player to actually care? To actually feel the pain and loss of them?
Well, you're not exactly setting a high standard by putting Aerith up there, a random girl that falls for the protagonist for essentially no reason, does nothing other than be the dumb girl for the team, and then dies shortly after. So, yeah, not expecting much, but let's see what you have to say.
The character that has a reason to be doing what they're doing is much more interesting and valuable than the character that is saving the world just because they can.
Oh, that's all you had to say. Hey, you know that incredibly obvious no-shit thing you should do to give a character a reason to even exist? Yeah, do that and people will care for their death, I guess.
Now, you don't just want to copy-paste real things that happen to you into the game, of course. But drawing inspiration from things you've gone through will at least give you a good starting point for characters and plot.
It wouldn't be a terrible writing advice video without a horrible misunderstanding of the quote, write what you know. Well, not a terrible writing advice video. He actually knows what he's talking about. But a video with terrible advice. Write what you know is one of the most overused quotes when it comes to writing. But this isn't actually what it meant. All it means is a mindset. To write convincing anger in a character, for example, just think about something that made you angry. Get into that mindset. Understand the cause and how you felt, how it changed the way you thought. That's it. It didn't mean fantasize your life.
In the first part of my Guy's Melody Let's Play, I got called out for using a very cliché trope. The cliché trope in question was, we're orphans, pity us. The thing is, that wasn't what the scene was about at all.
It's funny that you're criticizing people that didn't understand while missing their point entirely. It doesn't matter that it wasn't the focus of the scene. The cliché is still there. It doesn't matter if it's not the focus. It's still there and cliched to hell.
The point of the scene was to create a relatable situation for the player.
Yeah, I remember the time when I yelled at my sister for continuing our dead parents' beliefs. So relatable. This is why I hate the term relatable so much. No, if a character is relatable, they're a bland, normal person. Making a character understandable is a better way of putting it. Being able to understand why they believe what they do and act the way they do. And secondly, it doesn't matter what your intention was.
Perfect characters, well, are boring. If they don't have problems they need to overcome, why are we watching their story? I find it's a good practice to make characters suffer a bit. Not necessarily some sort of earth-shattering emo backstory.
That thing you do with literally all of your characters. But anyway, this section is so stupid it's not even worth responding to. Basically, make characters have flaws. Yeah, no shit. I honestly have the impression you believe you're the first person to think about writing.
This can be incredibly helpful when writing antagonists. That is, the bad guys.
And there you go again, explaining simple shit to us like we're retarded. We know what an antagonist is.
I've always found the main villain in games hard to write. I have a hard time relating to them, even in mainstream games. I always find myself asking, why are you evil?
And you don't even understand this. Fantastic. Everyone knows when writing an antagonist, treat them as the hero of their own story. That story just opposes the protagonists. Unless it's satire, of course, but for stories that take themselves seriously, that's how you do it.
Thinking about why he's the villain, how he got there, and why he's doing what he's doing.
Allow me to summarize everything she says about villains in a way that doesn't treat you like a mentally handicapped 10-year-old. Villains are people too. No fucking shit.
But an okay game can gain a lot of momentum just by having an interesting villain.
I am actually offended by this. The art of writing is offended by this. Just by having an interesting villain? Oh yeah, that minor thing. It's just half the driving force of the entire story.
Just make sure your characters are more than a character type and a job class, and you're off to a good start.
That thing that anyone that gives half a shit is going to do. If they care, filling in classes with random characters would never even cross their mind. This whole thing is just showing how you don't take writing seriously. I never felt your respect for your work when I played it, and listening to this is only reinforcing it.
On the subject of character dialogue, make sure your characters actually talk to each other.
If it means something, yes. Every line should tell you something about the character or advance an arc. If it doesn't do that, no, get rid of it.
Love your characters! This is my most important rule. If you don't care for them, if you don't love them, then you have absolutely no right to expect anyone else to.
Yup. Unfortunately, your love is shallower than fan shipping. So shallow, in fact, I doubt its existence.